Imagine a fog-shrouded swamp in 1840s South Carolina, where the ground exhales a metallic breath that silences every living thing. No birds cry, no serpents coil, no rats scurry. But in the slave quarters sealed with its cursed clay, human souls withered under an unseen wrath, echoing the biblical plagues of Egypt. What unholy secret bound them all? Stay with me, this is no ghost story, but a divine reckoning etched in the earth itself. In the shadowed heart of Charleston, South Carolina, during the sweltering antebellum years, the land whispered secrets that the wind dared not carry. It was a city draped in the opulent veils of Spanish moss and magnolia blooms, where the elite sipped mint juleps on wide verandas, their laughter floating over the muffled cries from distant auction blocks. But beneath this facade of southern grandeur lay a festering underbelly, a moral abyss where human lives were commodified like bales of cotton. The year 1847 marked a turning point, not in the grand annals of history books, but in the quiet, insidious revelations unearthed by those who dared to dig deeper. City surveyors, armed with chains and theodolites, stumbled upon a pattern that chilled the soul: a series of slave quarters scattered across the Lowcountry, from the brackish edges of the Ashley River to the mosquito-haunted swamps inland. These humble structures, pieced together from rough-hewn timber and palmetto thatch, shared a defiance against nature's invaders. No rats gnawed at the meager rations within. No venomous cottonmouths slithered through the cracks to claim sleeping children. No swarms of insects buzzed in the stifling air, turning rest into torment. It was as if an invisible hand, perhaps divine, perhaps infernal, had drawn a sacred circle around these dwellings, repelling the beasts of the field in a twisted parody of Noah's Ark. The surveyor's reports, penned in meticulous script under flickering candlelight, captured this anomaly with a mix of scientific curiosity and unspoken dread. Structures exhibit unnatural sterility, one entry read, devoid of vermin as if sanctified or cursed. Yet these documents were swiftly sequestered in the dusty vaults of Charleston's municipal offices, stamped with bureaucratic seals that screamed suppression, confidential, review indefinite. In a South teetering on the brink of sectional strife, where whispers of abolition could ignite duels or lynchings, such findings were dynamite. They threatened to expose not just a quirk of nature, but a deeper rot in the institution of slavery itself, a system that mirrored the biblical Pharaoh's oppression, grinding souls underfoot while the powerful feasted. What linked these quarters? What force kept the creatures at bay? And at what spiritual cost to the enslaved, whose bodies bore the invisible scars of this blessing? The truth, when it clawed its way to light, would reveal a haunting legacy of divine justice deferred, where the earth itself seemed to enact retribution for sins unrepented. Before we plunge deeper into this tale of shadowed quarters and the relentless seeker who unearthed their poison, pause with me. If your spirit stirs at histories that weave the threads of human suffering with eternal questions of sin, redemption, and the Almighty's quiet fury, subscribe now. This channel illuminates the forgotten corridors of America's past, where the ghosts of injustice demand to be heard. And tell me in the comments, from what corner of this vast land are you joining us? Let's map the reach of these buried truths together. Charleston in 1847 pulsed with a deceptive vitality, a port city where the salty tang of the harbor mingled with the sweet decay of blooming jasmine. Ships from Liverpool and Havana crowded the wharves, unloading crates of fine silks and spices while loading holds with rice stained by the sweat of unseen laborers. The cobblestone streets echoed with the clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages, gas lamps casting golden halos on the facades of stately homes adorned with wrought-iron balconies. Church bells from St. Michael's pealed across the rooftops, calling the faithful to pews where sermons extolled Christian virtue even as the same congregants owned souls in defiance of the gospel's call to love thy neighbor. This was a place of profound hypocrisy, where wealth flowed from the blood-soaked fields of indigo and cotton, and the Lowcountry plantations formed a verdant empire of exploitation. The rice paddies, with their labyrinthine dikes and floodgates, were engineering marvels that demanded ceaseless toil. Enslaved workers waded thigh-deep in fetid water, planting seeds under the merciless sun, their backs bent like biblical laborers in Egypt's brickyards. Malaria stalked them like a vengeful angel, felling the weak with fevers that burned hotter than hellfire. The task system, touted as merciful compared to the whip-driven gangs of the Deep South, was a cruel illusion, assigning quotas that broke bodies and spirits alike, measuring human worth in pounds of harvest. Into this moral quagmire stepped Elias Vance, a 32-year-old surveyor from the Quaker-influenced streets of Philadelphia. He was a man forged in the fires of intellect and conscience, his frame wiry and unassuming, with prematurely silvering hair that framed a face etched by thoughtful furrows. His eyes, a piercing gray, held the intensity of one who saw beyond surfaces. Colleagues whispered they could strip away illusions like a scalpel through flesh. Educated at the University of Pennsylvania, Vance had imbibed the enlightenment of geology, chemistry, and moral philosophy. He viewed the world through a lens of empirical truth, tempered by a reformer's fire that burned against injustice. Yet personal duty drew him south. His father's untimely death had left a tangle of debts, and this Charleston contract promised solvency. He arrived on a steamer belching coal smoke, the humid air wrapping around him like a shroud as he disembarked amid the chaos of the docks, sailors shouting in foreign tongues, enslaved porters heaving crates under overseers' watchful eyes. Vance secured modest lodgings on Church Street, a boarding house overseen by the stern yet kindly widow Amelia Talbert. His room was a Spartan sanctuary, a narrow bed, a writing desk scarred by ink stains, and a window framing a garden riotous with camellias whose petals unfurled like blood-red prayers. Mornings found him poring over faded maps in the city's archives, the air thick with the musty scent of aging parchment. The records were a labyrinthine mess, colonial grants clashing with hasty deeds, boundaries shifting like sands in a storm. What began as rote drudgery soon unveiled anomalies that pricked his scientific soul. Buried in health inspectors' tomes from 1843 onward, fleeting notes described slave quarters eerily pristine, no infestation observed, contrary to prevailing conditions. A 1846 survey at Middleton Place echoed this, quarters absent of rodent sign, unlike adjacent barns. These weren't isolated quirks, they formed a constellation across 7 plantations, a pattern screaming for decryption. In Vance's mind, this defied natural order. Slave quarters were hellish abodes, drafty shanties with earthen floors that invited every pestilence. Rats feasted on scraps, spreading plagues reminiscent of the biblical rodents that devoured Pharaoh's stores. Snakes, symbols of temptation since Eden, lurked in shadows, their bites a swift judgment. Insects swarmed like locusts, turning skin into maps of torment. Yet these select dwellings stood as sanctuaries or tombs? Vance's conscience, steeped in abolitionist whispers from his northern circles, recoiled at the implications. Was this a mercy or a subtler curse? He resolved to probe deeper, even if it veered from his mandate. Securing access proved a gauntlet of southern suspicion. Planters eyed northern interlopers as harbingers of unrest, especially amid the Mexican War's feverish debates over slavery's expansion. Vance cloaked his intent in officialdom. Boundary clarifications require full inspection. Grudging permissions came, shadowed by overseers who trailed him like suspicious wardens. His inaugural visit was to Riverside Plantation, a sprawling domain along the Ashley's Lazy Bends, owned by the imperious Nathaniel Drayton. The manor loomed like a whitewashed idol, its columns gleaming under ancient oaks festooned with moss that swayed like ghostly veils. Rice fields extended in emerald infinity, divided by canals where water shimmered like molten silver under the noon sun. The quarters huddled a quarter-mile distant, a forlorn cluster of one-room huts exhaling the faint smoke of cooking fires. Accompanied by Cyrus Holt, a burly overseer with a perpetual scowl and a whip coiled at his belt like a serpent, Vance approached with measured steps. The air grew heavy, pregnant with unspoken suffering. Children's laughter pierced the distance, fleeting as a prayer before silence reclaimed the scene. Nothing but nigger shacks, Holt grumbled, his boots kicking up dust that danced in sunbeams. But Vance's senses sharpened, no frantic scurrying echoed from walls, no slithering shadows crossed thresholds. The huts' exteriors bore the scars of weather, boards warped by rain, roofs sagging under palmetto fronds, but an uncanny peace enveloped them. Requesting entry to an unoccupied dwelling, Vance stepped inside, the door creaking like a confessional hinge. Dim light filtered through chinks, illuminating pallets of straw matted with wear, a crude hearth blackened by soot, iron pots hanging like pendulums. The air held the ghosts of lives, sweat-soaked linens, the faint char of cornmeal. Yet no droppings littered the floor, no nests burrowed in corners, no shed skins coiled in rafters. It was a void, a biblical clean sweep akin to the Passover's spared houses. His fingers traced the walls, encountering the sealant, a gray clay packed into every fissure, its surface slick as oil, emanating a metallic tang that evoked forges of hell or alchemical labs. This clay, its origin? Vance inquired, voice steady despite the chill tracing his spine. Holt's eyes narrowed, irritation flaring like a struck match. Dug from the dirt, Yankee. The darkies fetch it, we don't bother with such trifles. Undeterred, Vance scraped a sample into a vial, the clay yielding with a soft, almost living squelch. Over ensuing weeks, he traversed 6 more estates, each visit a pilgrimage into moral wilderness. At Willow Bend, the quarters nestled amid cypress groves, their silence broken only by distant field chants that rose like lamentations. At Seattle, waves crashed nearby, salt air mingling with the clay's acrid scent. Invariably, the gray chinking appeared, a uniform ward against nature's hordes. Overseers dismissed queries with sneers, but Vance's hypothesis crystallized: this clay was the talisman, its properties a natural exorcism. But what of its toll on human flesh? Did it harbor a poison, a slow divine retribution for the sins of bondage? Lacking local labs untainted by Southern bias, Vance dispatched samples north to Dr. Alastair Finch, a chemist brethren in Philadelphia. Analyze for toxins, his letter implored, and ponder effects on prolonged exposure. Weeks stretched like taut bowstrings as he awaited reply, his surveying duties a mechanical blur against the obsession gnawing his soul. Nights in his room, under the camellia's watchful bloom, he pored over Bibles borrowed from Mrs. Talbert, passages of Job's afflictions, Ezekiel's visions of defiled lands, seeking spiritual parallels to this earthly enigma. Fate intervened during a survey at Oakwood Plantation, where ancient oaks stood sentinel over fields scarred by plowshares. Alone momentarily, the overseer diverted by a worker's collapse, Vance measured boundaries when a figure emerged from shadows. She was Ilara, revered as Mama Ilara among her kin, a woman of indeterminate age, her frame stooped yet radiating an aura of unbowed dignity. White hair framed a face carved by sorrow, eyes deep pools reflecting generations' pain. Born on Gullah shores, she embodied the resilient spirit of her people, weaving African lore with Christian hymns in secret gatherings. "You the one pokin' round the still houses," she stated, voice a gravelly melody laced with Gullah inflections. Vance froze, his chain clinking softly. Word traveled on invisible winds, the grapevine telegraph of the oppressed. "I'm seeking understanding," he replied, meeting her gaze. "Why do vermin shun these places?" Ilara's laugh was bitter, echoing like dry leaves. "Understandin'? White folk chase that like fool's gold. But you got questions burnin' in them eyes." She leaned on her gnarled cane, carved with symbols he couldn't decipher, perhaps wards against evil, or maps to freedom. "It's the gray mud from the cursed ground," she confided, glancing warily. "We call it the Whisperin' Earth, a bog 3 miles yonder, where the devil himself stirred the soil. Animals flee it, even spirits hover cautious. We haul that mud in baskets, knees deep in muck, to seal our walls. Keeps out the rats that steal our babe's breath, snakes that strike like judgment." Her words painted vivid horrors, midnight treks under moonless skies, buckets heavy as sins, the clay's chill seeping into bones. But Vance pressed, "At what price?" Ilara's face darkened, shadows playing like omens. "The price of breathin' in poison. Folks in them houses weaken, bones ache like fire, teeth loosen like autumn leaves, bodies waste away slow, like the lepers in scripture. We know it's killin' us, generation after generation, but what's the choice? Die quick from fever or slow from the mud's curse? We choose survival, even if it echoes Cain's mark, cursed ground for cursed lives." Vance's heart clenched, a surge of empathy mingling with righteous fury. This was no mere anomaly, it was a microcosm of slavery's evil, a forced bargain with death, symbolizing the broader spiritual decay. "How long?" he whispered. "Since the ships first brought us chained," Ilara replied. "Grandmothers whispered of it, mixin' it with prayers to the old gods and the new. White folks, blind as Pharisees, buildin' empires on our graves." She sketched directions in the dirt, a twisted path through forsaken fields, marked by lightning-scarred trees and forgotten graves, then fixed him with a prophetic stare. "You gon' chase this demon? Knowledge ain't freedom, it's a heavier chain. What you do when you find the Almighty's hand in the dirt, judgin' us all?" Her words lingered like incense as she vanished into the quarter's gloom, leaving Vance adrift in moral tempest. That night, scriptures haunted his dreams. "Cursed is the ground because of you," from Genesis, a divine echo of this poisoned legacy. Dawn broke with resolve, he would confront the whispering earth, vial in hand, to unmask its secrets. The expedition unfolded under a leaden sky, humidity cloaking him like guilt. Equipped with provisions and tools, Vance ventured inland, forsaking manicured paths for wilderness tangles. Forests thickened, cypress knees jutting like accusatory fingers from brackish pools. Hours blurred in sweat and strain, wading through tannin-stained waters that tugged at boots like grasping souls. Gradually, life ebbed, bird calls faded to whispers, insects droned silenced, wind stilled as if holding breath. The metallic reek intensified, assaulting senses like brimstone. Then, revelation, the swamp sprawled before him, a desolate basin of perhaps 2 acres, water gray and viscous, surface iridescent with unnatural sheen. Bordering trees withered, bark sloughing like leprous skin, exposing pallid cores. No ripple disturbed the pool, no creature stirred a forsaken Eden, where life recoiled from divine wrath. Kneeling at the edge, Vance touched the clay, its greasy yield confirming suspicions. This was the source, a geological anomaly pregnant with peril, perhaps arsenic-laced or heavy with lead, nature's own instrument of justice, turning the oppressor's tools against the oppressed in a cruel irony. As he collected samples, a profound dread settled. This clay symbolized deeper sins, a biblical toxin mirroring the poison of slavery itself. Generations had suffered its slow venom, bodies crumbling while spirits endured, awaiting redemption's dawn. Vance rose, vial heavy as a relic, vowing to amplify this whisper into a roar that might shatter chains. But in that silent void, he pondered, was this earth's retribution, or heaven's delayed thunder? The answer would redefine his soul's quest. In the oppressive hush of the whispering earth, Elias Vance knelt amidst the desolation, his knees sinking into the yielding gray mire that clung like a sinner's guilt. The sun filtered through skeletal branches overhead, casting fractured shadows across the milky water's surface, where oily rainbows danced in mockery of creation's purity. No bird dared alight on the withered limbs, no frog croaked from the depths, even the relentless mosquitoes of the Lowcountry held back, as if repelled by an ancient taboo. The air hung thick, laced with that metallic tang, sharp as blood on iron, evoking the forges of judgment where souls are tested. Vance's hands, calloused from chains and theodolites, trembled slightly as he scooped the clay into glass vials, careful to minimize contact, for instinct whispered of peril. This was no ordinary earth, it pulsed with a forbidden essence, a geological heresy that defied the Lord's design for fertile ground. As he worked, a faint susurrus rose from the bog, tiny bubbles bursting like suppressed confessions, releasing vapors that carried the weight of buried wrongs. It sounded almost vocal, a chorus of lamentations from the depths, as if the land itself mourned the atrocities it had witnessed, echoing the biblical cries of Abel's blood from the soil. He sketched hurriedly in his leather-bound notebook, lines capturing the twisted trunks of dead cypresses, their bark peeling like flayed skin under divine scourge. The water's gray sheen mirrored a clouded conscience, and the absolute silence amplified his heartbeat, a solitary drum in this forsaken tabernacle. An hour passed in this eerie vigil, the heat building like the fires of Gehenna, sweat tracing rivulets down his neck, mingling with the clay's residue. Vance pondered Mama Ilara's words, the bad place, where even spirits tread lightly. This was a site of natural malediction, perhaps a remnant of the flood's receding waters, laden with toxins as punishment for humanity's hubris. Rising at last, vials secured in his satchel like relics of sin, he retraced his path through the tangled underbrush, palmettos slashing at his trousers like accusing fingers. His mind churned with questions. What alchemical curse imbued this clay? How did it ward off beasts while gnawing at human vitality? Symptoms flashed in his thoughts: aching bones like Job's afflictions, falling teeth as markers of decay, weakness mirroring the Israelites' bondage. This was no mere anomaly, it was a spiritual metaphor, the earth enacting retribution for the abomination of slavery, poisoning the oppressor's property in a slow, inexorable judgment. Evening descended upon Charleston as Vance returned to his boarding house, the city's gas lamps flickering to life like wary sentinels against the encroaching dark. His boots left muddy prints on Mrs. Talbert's polished floors, the scent of swamp clinging to him like a shroud. Exhaustion etched his features, but anticipation quickened his step. A letter awaited, its seal unbroken, from Dr. Alastair Finch. In the dim glow of his room's oil lamp, camellias outside nodding like silent witnesses, Vance tore open the envelope. The paper crackled, words leaping forth in Finch's precise script. My dear Elias, the analyses astound and appall. Your clay harbors infernal concentrations of heavy metals, lead predominant, arsenic and mercury in league. Let alone repels vermin, rodents and serpents flee its taint, sensing death's approach. Yet for humankind, this is perdition incarnate. Chronic ingestion or inhalation yields fatigue as of the weary pilgrim, abdominal torments akin to divine smiting, cognitive fog veiling the mind like sin's deceit. In extremis, it claims life stealthily, a thief in the night. Geological origin suspect, a vein of ore, perhaps cinnabar or galena, leaching into sediments. Coastal strata often conceal such veins, shunned by the wise. If enslaved souls dwell amid this toxin, sealed in walls of their own making, we confront a calamity biblical in scope, plagues upon the house of bondage. Alert authorities forthwith, this demands redress. Yours in science and solidarity, Alistair Vance. Reread the missive thrice, the lamp's flame dancing shadows across the page, mirroring the turmoil in his soul. Lead, arsenic, mercury, these were the alchemist's poisons, symbols of corruption since antiquity, now weaponized unwittingly against the innocent. He envisioned children in those quarters, inhaling dust finer than incense, their growing forms twisted by neurotoxic whispers, brains fogged as if by demonic possession. Women laboring through pregnancies marred by miscarriage, stillbirths like the barren wombs in Scripture. Men, once strong as Samson, reduced to frailty, their strength sapped as Delilah's betrayal. Ilara's resignation echoed, "We choose the slow sickness." A forced covenant with death, reminiscent of the Israelites' golden calf idolatry to survival amid oppression. Rage kindled in Vance's chest, a righteous fire like the prophet's zeal. This was no accident, it was systemic sin, the planter's greed turning the earth against the oppressed, a divine irony where the ground cursed by man's iniquity now cursed back. Dawn broke with purpose, Vance marched to the city offices, Finch's letter clutched like a talisman. The building loomed, its columns evoking ancient temples where false gods were worshipped. He demanded audience with Dr. Samuel Priolo, the health officer, a scion of Charleston's elite, his office a sanctum of leather-bound tomes and skeletal diagrams, air heavy with pipe smoke and pomposity. Priolo, 50s etched in patrician lines, listened with feigned courtesy, fingers steepled like a judge at trial. Vance laid bare the revelations, samples, symptoms, the swamp's malediction. Silence followed, thick as swamp fog. Then Priolo spoke, voice smooth as serpent's tongue, "Mr. Vance, your zeal commends you, yet flaws abound." Vance bristled, "Flaws?" "The poisons are irrefutable, leads grip universal." Priolo's eyes narrowed, but Finch labors afar, ignorant of southern truths. The Negro's constitution diverges, thicker dermis, resilient blood, attuned to our clime's rigors. What fells the white man may spare them, a providential adaptation. Disbelief surged in Vance, a wave crashing against faith in reason. Toxins heed no race, lead binds all flesh alike. Priolo's tone iced, literature affirms racial variances, established verities. Slavery undergirds our realm, divinely ordained. Your claims fuel abolition's flames, unfounded assaults on sacred order. Vance countered, I bear analyses, testimonies, families withered like blighted vines. Priolo sneered, slave prattle? Unreliable as shifting sands. The exchange devolved, Vance's pleas rebounding off walls of denial, Priolo a guardian of iniquity, blind as the Pharisees to truth's light. Departing, Vance's steps echoed hollow, rage and despair entwining like thorns in Christ's crown. Naivety shattered, power shielded sin, facts mere pebbles against fortified walls. Undeterred, Vance pivoted to shadows, seeking voices from the margins. He revisited plantations under guises of surveys, slipping past overseers' watchful eyes, hawks perched on moral ruins. In twilight groves, amid rustling cane that whispered secrets, he conversed with the enslaved. An elder named Josiah, eyes milky with age yet sharp with memory, recounted, the gray mud saves from bites but steals our fire, limbs heavy as chains, minds clouded like storm skies. A young mother, Lila, cradled her frail child, he don't thrive, born weak, cries echo in psalms of lament. Tales cascaded, miscarriages as barren fields, deformities like curses upon the firstborn, chronic aches mirroring the stripes of the lash. Vance charted correlations, years in tainted quarters equating severity, a dose of damnation. He anonymized accounts, shielding informants from reprisal's sword, his notebook a ledger of sins awaiting judgment day. As autumn's chill seeped into Charleston's bones, Vance's obsession deepened, mirroring the monomaniac prophets. Weight melted from his frame, sleep fractured by visions of oozing walls and spectral accusations. Mrs. Talbert fretted, her garden camellias wilting in sympathy. Surveillance shadowed him, planters' spies, whispers in parlors of the meddlesome Yankee. Culmination came in October. Richard Wentworth, envoy of the Planters Association, intruded upon the boarding house parlor, air thick with tension like pre-storm ozone. Impeccably attired, confidence a blade sheathed in velvet, Mr. Vance, your probes into quarters unsettle. Vance parried, mere surveys. Wentworth's smile sliced, we know of samples, slave chats, northern missives, treasonous meddling. Vance stood firm, poison ravages innocence, I expose evil. Wentworth's gaze hardened, slaves are chattel, no souls for your pity. Cease, destroy records, depart or face ruin. Threat hung like noose, contract voided, reputation smeared, safety forfeit. Fear gripped Vance, yet moral imperative burned brighter. He owed the afflicted echoes of the Good Samaritan, binding wounds amid peril. Frantic days followed, duplicating documents in candlelit frenzy, parcels dispatched to Northern allies, Finch, abolitionist presses, sympathetic lawmakers. Varied couriers ensured survival, like seeds scattered on fertile ground. On the sixth day, he fled, train whistle a dirge as Charleston faded, relief laced with sorrow. The poison legacy endured, but truth seeded elsewhere, awaiting harvest. Philadelphia's crisp November embraced Vance, yet he arrived gaunt, haunted, 20 pounds lighter, nightmares plaguing like demonic visitations, endless quarters bleeding clay, ghosts pleading redemption. Reuniting with Finch in a university coffeehouse, steam rising like prayers. Elias, what hell claimed you? Vance unburdened, discoveries, confrontations, exile. Finch paled, publish we must awaken consciences. Vance sighed, attempts falter, dismissed as agitprop. Yet Finch, Philosophical Society affiliate, proposed a venue, present as toxicology treatise, veiling politics in science's cloak. Weeks of preparation ensued, analyses refined, maps etched with precision, statistics a bulwark against doubt. Human anguish subdued, focus on mechanisms, metals insidious leach, symptoms progression like sin's creep. January 1848's frigid eve, the society's hall aglow with intellect's lamps, 30 scholars assembled, professors' spectacles glinting, physicians' brows furrowed. Vance orated an hour, voice resonant despite inner quake, unveiling the clay's venom as environmental scourge, dose-response curves like divine equations. Silence blanketed the room, then queries erupted, causation muddled by hardship, malnutrition, toil? Vance rebutted, controls applied, correlations stark. Objections mounted, data anecdotal, samples scant. He defended, resources constrained, yet chemistry unassailable. Dr. Samuel Morton interjected, racial resilience overlooked, Negro physiology resists. Vance flared, pseudoscience masking bias, toxicity universal. Debate ignited, factions clashing like theological schisms, defenders praising rigor, detractors decrying propaganda. Ultimately, publication denied, insufficient rigor, tainted by agenda. Defeat cloaked Vance like winter's pall, yet embers of hope flickered. This was but one battle in redemption's war, truth, like the gospel, would prevail against gates of hell. The clay's legacy haunted, a spiritual admonition, sins of bondage invited divine toxins, poisoning body and soul until justice dawned. Even in the hallowed halls of Philadelphia's intellectual elite, where reason was worshipped like a golden calf, Elias Vance's revelations crumbled against the altar of convenience. The American Philosophical Society, bastion of enlightenment, had rejected his findings not for lack of rigor, but because truth demanded a reckoning with the nation's original sin. Slavery's tendrils reached even here, coiling around hearts that professed liberty while profiting from chains. Yet one soul pierced the veil of denial, Catherine Hartwell, a 26-year-old firebrand of abolition, daughter of a shipping magnate whose vessels had once carried cotton stained by invisible blood. Unwed by defiant choice, Catherine moved in radical circles, hosting clandestine meetings, funneling funds to the Underground Railroad. Her eyes, sharp as flint, had absorbed Vance's presentation with a hunger for weapons against the peculiar institution. As the hall emptied amid murmurs of discomfort, she approached him, voice low amid the echoing chamber, Mr. Vance, your words carry the weight of prophecy. We must speak alone. The following afternoon, in the opulent parlor of the Hartwell townhouse on Rittenhouse Square, sunlight filtering through lace curtains onto mahogany tables laden with abolitionist tracts, they convened. Crystal decanters caught the light like frozen tears, the air scented with bergamot and resolve. Your discovery is a thunderbolt, Catherine began, her posture regally yet fervent, but you've wielded it as a scalpel when it demands a sword. Vance, weary lines etching his face deeper since Charleston's ordeal, leaned forward. Explain. She did, unflinching. Science alone won't shatter chains. Men dismiss facts that indict their souls. This isn't toxicology, it's moral abomination, a slow crucifixion engineered for profit. To awaken consciences, you must make them feel the nails, the children's stunted limbs, the mother's barren wombs, the elders' minds unraveling like frayed scripture. Vance protested faintly. Newspapers had spurned him, but Catherine's vision ignited hope. Bypass the gatekeepers. Abolitionist presses hunger for such testimonies. Tour the lecture circuits, churches, lyceums, halls where the faithful gather. Speak not to intellects armored in denial, but to hearts open to God's call for justice. Hesitant, Vance recoiled from spectacle. He was a man of theodolites and vials, not podiums. Yet desperation, mingled with Catherine's persuasive fire, her eyes alight with the zeal of Harriet Tubman's resolve, prevailed. Over months, with her connections weaving a web of invitations, Vance embarked on a speaking odyssey across Pennsylvania and New York. In dimly lit Quaker meeting houses, where plain benches creaked under attentive crowds, and in bustling abolitionist halls aglow with whale oil lamps, he unfolded the tale. Voice gaining strength like a river swelling toward justice, Vance painted the silent quarters, humble shacks sealed with gray venom, repelling serpents yet inviting a subtler evil, toxins seeping into lungs like original sin into the soul. He unfurled maps under lantern light, chemical analyses projected as irrefutable tablets of law. Anonymized testimonies rang out, a father's lament for a child born frail as withered fig tree, a woman's grief over miscarriages echoing Rachel weeping for her children. Audiences stirred to gasps rippling like wind through wheat, tears tracing cheeks in the flickering glow, fists clenching in righteous fury. End this Pharaoh's plague, voices cried, demands for emancipation thundering like prophetic calls. Yet shadows pursued. Pro-slavery hecklers infiltrated gatherings, bellowing denunciations, hurling threats veiled in scripture twisted to defend bondage. Anonymous missives arrived, scrawled accusations of treason, racial betrayal. One brick shattered his window under moonless sky, note tied with twine, return south, Yankee agitator, tar and feathers await. Frederick. Douglass nodded to his courage in orations, Harriet Beecher Stowe penned admiration, her words a bomb foreshadowing her own literary reckoning. But acclaim hollowed Vance's spirit. Fame was ashes, the quarters endured, clay oozing poison, generations withering while he recited horrors to safe northern ears. Guilt gnawed like the toxins he decried, a spiritual lead weighing his conscience. Summer 1849 brought a missive that reignited the quest, delivered to Catherine's hands amid blooming hydrangeas. From Jacob Hemlock, a free black Charlestonian navigating perilous freedoms, taxed, curfewed, ever suspect. Cryptic lines hinted at depths unplumbed, your clay revelations scratched the surface. Deliberate choices lurk beneath, knowledge withheld for gain. Return, and I'll unveil proofs too perilous for paper. Catherine's brow furrowed, a snare, Elias. Wentworth's hounds crave your scalp. Vance's resolve hardened, eyes reflecting swamp's gray sheen. If authentic, this could indict them eternally, not ignorance, but malice aforethought. Precautions layered, scheduled dispatches to Elias's lifelines, alias for travel, a pistol, cold and unfamiliar in his grasp, symbol of reluctant violence against his Quaker leanings. August's suffocating heat enveloped Charleston upon return, air thick as Judgment Day, jasmine cloying like false piety. A nondescript boarding house sheltered him, messages relayed through veiled channels. 2 days later, Hemlock materialized, mid-50s, graying temples framing cautious eyes, posture honed by survival's edge. Free yet fettered, his kind trod Charleston streets warily, badges of liberty pinned like targets. In Vance's shuttered room, curtains drawn against prying gaslight, truths spilled. Your findings hold, Hemlock intoned, voice gravelly as Lowcountry tides, but malice, not oversight, birthed them. Planters knew the clay's curse, embraced it for thrift. Vance's pulse thundered, prove it. Hemlock's gaze pierced, I served. Nathaniel Drayton, Riverside's lord, house slave till freedom bought with blood sweat savings. Literate by his wife's whim, I copied ledgers. Entries tallied lives against savings, clay slashed costs, banished pests, sickness spiked, deaths rose, yet acceptable losses for profits ledger. Calculations chilled like swamp vapors, human depreciation offset by construction economies, souls reduced to line items as in Babylonian slave markets. Shared among elites in smoke-filled parlors, a conspiracy of silence to thwart abolitionist meddling. Records locked in Drayton's safe, Hemlock concluded. Ironclad proof of intent. Testimony alone? Feudal black word against white dismissed as slander. But documents? Irrefutable as Moses' tablets. Theft loomed, felony shadowed by lynching snooze. Hemlock warned of perils, prison for Vance, death extra-legal for him. Yet moral imperative prevailed, a divine mandate echoing Exodus, expose Pharaoh's heart. I'll aid, Hemlock relented, but prudence guides. Planning consumed a week, Drayton's manor mapped from memory, piazzas, servant paths, studies isolation. A Planters Association conclave promised absence, Saturday Eve, hours of brandy and boasts. Wife retired opposite wing, servants quartered afar. Moonless night favored shadows. Vance paced, dread coiling like cottonmouth visions of capture, tar-soaked torment, spiritual trial mirroring Christ's garden agony. The night arrived, sultry darkness cloaking sin. Rendezvous at dockside warehouse, cotton bales looming like monuments to exploitation. Clad in black, they ghosted through alleys, gardens heavy with night-blooming Sirius exhaling ghostly perfume. Drayton's edifice rose, brick sentinel on Meeting Street, columns mocking Republican virtues. Rear kitchen door yielded to Hemlock's retained key, defiant relic. Inside, embers faint glow, sense of extinguished hearth and spices evoking forced labors. Hallways traversed on stockinged feet, floorboards creaking whispers of betrayal. Study, sanctum of iniquity, bookshelves guarding tomes on agronomy and pseudoscience justifying bondage. Massive desk dominated, safe embedded behind, iron maw. Lantern's hooded beam danced as Hemlock wielded picks, tools from underground networks, perhaps railroad forges. Minutes stretched eternal, Vance guarded door, ears straining for stirrings, wife's cough, servant's step. Click resounded like salvation's trumpet, door swung. Ledgers cascaded, fortunes inked in blood. Hemlock extracted the damning volume, leather-bound as a false Bible. Pages illuminated horrors, 1839 entry, Drayton's script precise as scalpel, new quarters chinked with western swamp clay, costs plummeted 60%, vermin eradicated. Inhabitants report ailments, weakness, osseous pain, mental diminution. Mortality elevated yet within viable thresholds for labor replacement. Annual savings, $1,200. Subsequent notations tracked experiment, health declines quantified, offset against efficiencies. Correspondence excerpts, shared with peers, collective pact to conceal lest northern fanatics exploit. Vance's whisper trembled, he accounted souls as expendable. Whole ledger risky absence noted swiftly. Copies instead, frantic transcription by lanterns tremble, pencils scratching like accusing quills. Hour of torment, sweat beating, fear's metallic taste mirroring clay. Completed, ledger restored, safe sealed, scene pristine as untouched grave. Egress mirrored entry, kitchen's chill, door's soft sigh, night's embrace. Blocks distant, in warehouse shadows, flee tonight, Hemlock urged. You're marked. Parting, Hemlock melting into alley's labyrinth, Vance toward lodgings, copies folded against heart like sacred writ. Unease prickled, shadows lengthening unnaturally, footsteps echoing faintly. Glances yielded nothing. Yet pursuits sense like divine foreboding. Near safety, confrontation, three bruisers emerging, visages rough-hewn as overseers' whips. Vance, leader snarled, Wentworth craves discourse on tonight's trespass. Pistol gripped futilely, numbers overwhelmed. Denial futile, seizure swift, arms pinioned, mouth gagged, blow to skull exploding stars. Awakening, throbbing skull, bonds biting wrists and ankles, cellar's dank mold, stagnation evoking swamp's breath. Stone floor leached warmth, faint light under door promised interrogation. Footsteps descended, Wentworth, immaculate in cruelty, flanked by enforcer. Defied warnings, Vance, voice silken venom. Consequences accrue. Pain and darkness deepened, yet Vance's spirit clung to copied truths, seeds of reckoning, perhaps to bloom an emancipation's dawn, exposing slavery's ledger where human divinity was debited for gold. In the fetid gloom of the cellar, where the air hung heavy with mold and the metallic tang of fear echoing the swamp's cursed breath, Elias Vance awoke to agony's embrace. His skull throbbed from the blow, a pulsating reminder of betrayal's swift hand. Ropes bit into wrists and ankles, binding him to the cold stone floor like a sacrificial offering on an altar of southern iniquity. Dim light seeped under the door above, casting elongated shadows that danced like demons in biblical torment. Wentworth's voice slithered down, "A place of privacy, Mr. Vance, where screams dissolve into silence, and truths are extracted like venom from a serpent." Denials proved futile. Wentworth descended, flanked by his silent enforcer, unfolding the pilfered copies with deliberate calm. Damning script, he mused, eyes scanning Drayton's cold calculus. Lives depreciated against clay's thrift, sickness acceptable for profit's harvest. Scandalous, if aired. Vance's spirit sank deeper than the harbor's abyss, risk-born in midnight shadows, now clutched by evil's architect. Yet Wentworth's motive unveiled, not justice feared, southern courts shielded white sinews, but inconvenience. Northern presses amplifying horrors, rallies brandishing proofs, instability eroding empires built on blood. Bad for commerce, he sneered, a merchant of souls weighing disruption's cost. Cooperation dangled as false mercy, name Confederates, Finch, Catherine, networks, and perhaps depart with breath intact, silenced eternally. Refusal? Oblivion in currents strong as divine judgment, body consigned to depths like Jonah fleeing Nineveh's call. Terror coiled in Vance's gut, cold as leaden poison. He believed this man's ruthlessness, forged in a society where human divinity was debited for gold. Yet surrender illusory, betrayal would seal death regardless, erasing loose threads. Silence armored him, a martyr's resolve echoing Christ's before Pilate. Wentworth's facade cracked, extract names, methods unrestricted, vitality preserved, for now. Knife unsheathed, glinting like Satan's temptation in wilderness gloom. Vance's breath hitched, untested by violence's crucible. He pondered endurance, protecting allies as guardians of sacred flame. But Providence intervened, crash resounded overhead, shouts piercing like angelic trumpets. Wentworth froze, gaze upward, intrusion? Door splintered, armed figures cascading in disciplined fury. Rescue materialized, hemlock foremost, lantern-bearer illuminating liberation's dawn, others, free blacks and white radicals, visages grim as avenging seraphs subduing captors with swift precision. Rope severed, Vance rose unsteadily, legs trembling like aspen in storm. Viable? Hemlock queried, steadying him. Explanations deferred, ascent to warehouse's cavernous shell, Doc's briny whisper invading. Trailed your seizure, Hemlock revealed amid hurried flight. Wentworth's hounds prowled, reinforcements rallied from shadowed allies. Papers reclaimed, tucked securely, evidence preserved against oblivion. Streets navigated in nocturnal veil, to wharf where skiff awaited, oars poised for exodus. Shipbound Philadelphia loomed offshore, sanctuary's promise. Vance's gratitude swelled, your peril, Hemlock interrupted, eyes fierce with gullifier, risk our eternal companion. Your quest kindles ours, truth's spark in tyranny's night. We've weary of silence amid suffering, your valor mirrors Moses confronting Pharaoh. Parting urgent, words truncated by tide's pull. Vance embarked, vessel cutting harbor's ink, Charleston's spires receding, steeples mocking piety, mansions veiling atrocities. Poisoned sleepers endured in quarters, while profiteers slumbered secure, yet proofs pulsed against his chest, seeds for reckoning's harvest. September 1849 welcomed Vance to Philadelphia's crisp embrace, frame gaunt yet spirit triumphant. Reunion with Finch and Catherine, parlor aglow, copies spread like prophetic scrolls. Horror mirrored outrage blazing as they absorbed entries, deliberate toxin embraced, lives amortized for annual gains, shared in conspiratorial councils. Irrefutable indictment, Catherine declared, zeal prophetic. Malice proven, changes the abolition tide. Dissemination ward reluctance, presses wary of southern reprisal. Yet October's Tribune erupted the exposé, Vance's Odyssey chronicled, ledger excerpts bared, calculations chilling as Midas's curse. Reprints cascaded northward, outrage tsunami, rallies thundering, petitions surging, politicians invoking federal probes. Religious voices, even southern fringes, decried barbarity, urging reform. Abolitionists wielded as Excalibur against peculiar institutions veil. Backlash ferocious, denunciations as forgery, Vance vilified thief, fabricator, race traitor. Drayton postured denial, misconstrued benevolence, Negro frailty inherent, not environmental. Libel threats evaporated, courtroom light dreaded. Controversy fueled sectional inferno, compromise of 1850s fragile bandages over festering wounds. Vance's orations amplified, halls packed, audiences confronting Ledger's arithmetic, suffering quantified, humanity nullified. Ambivalence swayed, confronting systems' visceral evil, not abstract paternalism, but engineered slow death. Yet victory bittersweet, quarters persisted, toxins leaching, authority inert amid publicity's storm. Spring 1850 bore Hemlock's missive, retribution's grim toll, arrests fabricated, exiles forced, surveillance's noose tightening. No regrets, he penned, but comprehend costs, we bear your courage's burden, as always under this yoke. Guilt-ravaged Vance, a spiritual hemorrhage, offers of aid dispatched, funds, legal shields, railroad conduits unanswered, fate veiled. Years ground onward, joy eclipsed by frustration's shadow. War's drumbeat crescendoed, Vance labored with sanitary commission, ameliorating camp's plagues, pondering quarters' ghosts. Validation flickered 1852, journal enshrined analyses, science's ledger acknowledging truths. 1853's anomaly, Virginia planter Thomas Whitfield, enlightened outlier, tested chinking post-exposure. Lead confirmed, quarters raised, rebuilt pristine. Public epistle urged emulation, minor ripple, yet tangible, lives spared, proof knowledge pierced entrenchment's armor. War engulfed, Vance, aged, aided from rear thoughts drifting to emancipation's promise. Reconstruction summoned final pilgrimage, 1865 Charleston, occupied, shattered, mansion scarred, economy in ruins, social edifice toppled. Quarters lingered, vacant sentinels, walls touched evoked generations' silent screams, clay crumbling, yet legacies indelible. Seekings yielded one, Sarah, childhood denizen, now 30s, seamstress in modest abode. Recognition dawned, the questioner from North, truth seeker. Query poignant, did it avail? Honesty compelled, partially awakening stirred, changes sparse. Insufficient. Her tale, mother's wasting demise, poison's revelation granting understanding amid grief. You unveiled, she affirmed. Truth endures, record for posterity, illuminating slavery's totality, not merely irons, but insidious venoms, calculated cruelties. Departure bore her benediction, truth's persistence, even amid inadequacy. Philadelphia reclaimed him, twilight years devoted to magnum opus's comprehensive testament, analyses woven with testimonies, ledger horrors immortalized. 1871 publication modest, nation fatigued by recollections, reconstruction's weariness prevailing. Yet scholars embraced, foundational for slavery's nuanced historiography, illuminating environmental atrocities amid physical. Quarters faded, demolished or decayed, swamp reclaimed by progress's fill. Yet narrative endured, archive's guardian, memory's vessel. Reminder stark, horrors birthed not by phantoms, but rational men and churchgoers, civilized, prioritizing ledgers over lives, comfort over compassion. Vance's quest resolved the enigma, no spectral ward, but deliberate toxin, prophet's cold equation. Truth he unearthed, battled to proclaim, persists in shocking potency, confronting ordinary evil's banality, where suffering tallies as expenditure, humanity expendable. Centuries hence, it indicts, worst depredations stem from calculated indifference, not monstrous aberration. Men attired in Sunday finery, extolling virtue, yet orchestrating slow genocide for marginal gains. This the silent quarter's profound chill, not haunting voids, but filled with men's unrepentant choices. Reflect upon this chronicle's depths. Was revelation exhaustive, or shadows linger, untold deaths, complicit silences? History's ledger incomplete, yet Vance's legacy illuminates. Truth, though delayed, claims justice in eternity's court.